Hello and welcome to the Film Yap. I am Christopher Lloyd, and we are here to do kind of an old thing that we haven't done in a while, which we really want to get back to, is Yap versus Yap. And that's where we have some people who have maybe differing, opposing views about a particular movie or a film-related subject, and we want to give them an opportunity to sort of air their grievances, hopefully without violence, although in this case, since we're all socially distanced these days, that's pretty easy. And of course, if you guys could introduce yourself, Andy.
Yeah, I'm Andy Carr.
And I'm Logan Sowash.
So the movie we're disagreeing about today is Promising Young Woman. This is a new film. It's not out yet. I believe it's coming out on theaters or video demand or both on Christmas Day.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, it's kind of a Yap plus Yap versus Yap because a lot of people are very, very high on this film. I am not. So I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to talk about a little bit about why this movie was so impactful for you. Logan, you want to start?
Yeah, of course. I mean, with Promising Young Woman, I've been excited for this film since it was supposed to come out in April, but of course COVID happened. And at that point I figured, probably alleviate my expectations a bit, but watching it, I was just surprised by the film. I think it's funny. I think it's dark. I think it's intense at times. It's even upsetting at its peak moments, but I think it really handles everything very well. And it has a very Heather's vibe with the script. It's got the production design that almost has a vibe of a Legally Blonde type film, super pastel, super bright, colorful. And for a directorial debut, I think it's a lot better than it has any right to be. So that's where I'm kind of at with it.
And Annie, could you maybe tell us a little bit about the film for those who haven't heard about it and aren't, cinema freaks like we are?
Yeah, so it's basically about this woman named Cassie who she was going to medical school and had this career ahead of her as a doctor, and then she had this traumatic event happen to her and one of her friends, and kind of as a result ends up on this sort of tear of vengeance against men in general, or men who would potentially do terrible things to women or take advantage of them. And so it's kind of this cathartic revenge movie about sort of, the Me Too movement and sexual harassment and all of that. And for me, I guess it worked because it's one of those movies that I think is really kind of riding this line where it's really trying to talk about something in kind of something that's a very sensitive subject for a lot of people, and it's talking about it in a very kind of frank way and almost flippant in a lot of ways. And it's willing to risk offending kind of everybody surrounding the topic, people that this topic is very close to, people who are, don't like talking about this topic, or people who would like to see a more mature conversation on the topic. I think it's, it risks not appealing to all of those people. And for me personally, I think it really threads that needle of being kind of daring or being, having the discussion about this topic in a very, violent, well, not necessarily violent, but in your face kind of way, an uncomfortable way. And it makes you uncomfortable to watch it and listen to it, and makes you uncomfortable that there's even a movie like this. But I think it's all in the name of kind of airing some grievances and, kind of getting out the anger, I think, that's associated with this issue for a lot of people.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So my take on it is I agree. It's a very serious subject. I'm not sure if I think that the film takes the subject very seriously, though. It's kind of in this weird realm of is it satire? Is it comedy? I've heard the film described as a comedy. I didn't really see any distinct, what I would call humorous or comedic elements until maybe the very, very end, the last 15 minutes or so, where I think it was definitely trying to go for laughs and poke you in the ribs a bit. But up until then, it is a grim slog, or at least it was to be.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the thing was, so the MO that she has with her revenge cycle is that, she had a friend in medical school who was sexually assaulted at a party when she was very, very drunk. And so her MO of what she does is she goes out to these clubs every night, but frequently, pretends to be falling down drunk to find these nice guys to take her home, basically to see if they will try and assault her. And then at that point, she drops the veil that she's drunk and, is basically like, no, I'm actually sober. And the film always, I have been criticized as a critic for being something of a literalist. That I'm, when things are just very much illogical, or, you can feel the construct of, no, that wouldn't actually work that way. It's sort of almost like analogous to horror films, where you're often, forced to watch people do incredibly stupid and illogical things so you can yell at the screen like, no, you wouldn't. But it goes beyond, because it's like, the way that plays out is she has these scenes which some of them are cringeworthy in terms of how they're trying to make you feel uncomfortable. The one in particular with the actor is it Christopher
Mintz-Plasse from McLovin from Superbad? Yeah.
It's intended to be incredibly uncomfortable and make you freak out, but to me, it didn't work out. I mean, literally, what I came away with that is, if she's dealing with these guys who would be, sorry, we're having a fourth participant here. I'll tell you what. Let me put it back to you, Logan, while I get her call.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when it comes to, I think for me, the whole Christopher Mintz-Plasse scene to me was extremely uncomfortable, mainly because, and I can't say for what Andy thought, but for me, almost every single one of her quote unquote victims, I felt like I met somebody in college that reminded me of that person. And the Christopher Mintz-Plasse character, my God, the rhetoric he used, certain sentences just felt so like I've met kind of like a stoner douchebag like that before in college. And it's weird to see, because I feel like it's with the script that makes me feel like that this is a serious topic for the writer, director, Emerald Fennell, but she's handling it in a way that, like, I think she's trying to be more approachable with it by being so over the top with it. Because I think, especially now, it turns for me, like, I prefer it either being so subtle that, like, once I pick up on it, then things start to be interesting, or just beat me over the head with it. Don't kind of be wishy-washy in between. And with Promising Young Woman, it beats you over the head with it almost immediately. But I kind of loved that, because it would, even though going into it exactly what it's trying to do, there's some great character moments in the middle, which I would say the middle does kind of sag a bit. Not too much, but I do think that, like, I really do appreciate just kind of like how over the top it is. Because especially in modern times, especially recent events, there are a lot of stories we've heard in the news where it's like, well, this should be easy. Like, this guy should be put in jail, but it isn't over a certain situation like that. So I think in that occasion, being blunt to the point where it's like super obvious is okay for me in certain degrees.
Yeah, the title even, I think, Promising Young Woman, we kind of hear that on the flip side, some of the more media central stories of the last few years. Like, there was that one in particular, I think it was a college athlete, and the judge ended up giving him probation and said something. If he didn't use the Promising Young Man, he used very similar language. And this is flipping on the side.
Yeah, well, and I would have to kind of, going off of what Logan said about those kind of uncomfortable scenes, and Chris, I know it didn't work for you that well, and I think I understand why, because while those scenes were kind of uncomfortable for me on the same level that they were for Logan, I think also those scenes with her kind of so-called victims, they're going for almost I think there's a comedic quality to them that's not, you're not meant to be taking these guys super seriously, even though guys out there exist and they're, super dangerous and horrifyingly, out of touch. I think the movie is kind of trying to, caricaturize them a little bit and like have some fun at their expense. And I think that even like you said goes into the title, where we're kind of playing off of tropes and talking points of the people who are part of this problem. We're kind of, there is mockery to it. I think there's a mocking quality to this movie all throughout.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Carey Mulligan, I will say, Carey Mulligan is great in it.
She's fantastic.
She's fantastic. I think she's going to get an Oscar nomination out of this, assuming the film at least gets seen by enough people in this strange year that we're in. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, it almost tried to go beyond not just those guys were caricatures, but on some level, almost every man in the film ends up becoming a caricature. And I'm not one of these guys that like can't stand to watch feminist movies where men are poked fun at. Believe me, speaking as a gender, we are well deserving of being made fun of.
Yeah.
But you know, it ends up being this almost universal thing of there's a big subplot in the film where she ends up having a real romance with this guy played by Bo Burnham, and we're like, no, he's not going to be one of those guys. He's going to be different. I'm not going to give anything away, but their disappointment will be had on some level by her. That gets into the stuff of we're getting into this area of like hashtag not all men, which is like a response that some women have when men point out that, hey, believe it or not, actually most men are not rapists. I'm presuming none of us three here have ever sexually assaulted anyone. No. And that kind of ends up actually becoming not just discounted, but actually made fun of. Like, to point that out, that just becomes a weird thing. I don't know. Again, getting back to the literalist note, I was really, the way she goes about these things, where she lets these men take her to their homes and basically start a sexual assault, actually, do some things physically that would be qualified as assault, and then stops them to basically sort of like speak to them in a sober tone and shame them. Right? That is not how that would work. If someone was actually doing that, if someone is scummy enough to take a drunk woman home and rape them, they would be scummy enough to still do it even after learning that she's not drunk. And what would likely end up happening with her is she would do that maybe like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times, and eventually she would meet the guy who would just beat the crap out of her when she pulls the reveal. And she'd probably end up being, seriously hurt or even killed. That's what actually would happen. So I'm hoping that this is not something that someone emulates in the real world and tries to pull off. But Logan, let me take it back to you.
Yeah, and then I think on top of that, I completely understand where you're going through thought process wise with those scenes. I also think this film does a great job of establishing that Carey Mulligan's Cassie is not in the right mindset in handling this. Like, this film handles the gray exceptionally well, especially with her character, because it's like there is a great moment with her and Bo Burnham where it's like there is a moment where, during the disappointment era, there might be something that like people will be turned off by, but like ends up adding a big answer, because it's like not all men are the same level amount of scumminess that others are in this film. And it does show that in this film with different types of male characters. And it shows that with Cassie, she is just such on a war path to basically make amends with something that she really is not at fault for, but feels like she is. That by the time it gets to the end of the film, it's very clear that like, this is not how someone's supposed to handle this. This is literally like a unique worst case scenario in terms of like how you should handle like your feelings and like your trauma surrounding this.
Yeah. All right, Andy, I'll let you have the last word. So obviously you guys feel very strongly about this film. What do you think is going to be the reaction to the general audience when it gets out there? How do you think this film is going to be perceived?
I think we're starting to see already kind of how things are going. And I think, maybe even this conversation here is a little microcosm of that. But, you look at like critic scores and it's generally very high. Whereas if you look like IMDb, like user scores, it's pretty low or mediocre. So I think people are going to be all over the place. And I think that's part of what's interesting about this movie, as I kind of mentioned earlier, how it's willing to risk, stepping on the toes of some people and making people uncomfortable. And, at least for my money, it's worthwhile in doing so in what it says about the subject matter.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I think we're going to see all sorts of reactions to this movie, as we already have. Good and bad.
I've seen reactions already where there are people who are saying this film isn't feminist enough. Like, there are people who are growing to hate this because it has any kind of semblance of feminism, because it is a female director, a female point of view, a film that is very cynical in terms of a woman's place in American culture right now. And then you have just like like very passionate feminists who are probably going to think, oh, they're just pandering to the basic feminism for like mainstream audiences.
Yeah,
which I think is crazy, but I guess I could see that.
Well, and the irony is not lost on me that, you know, there's 3 of us guys sitting around a circle talking about feminism, and I can't blame anybody who, you know, considers themselves a passionate feminist or thinks this movie is not feminist enough, because I think it does, you know, it's not necessarily the most mature conversation that could be had about this movie that's going on in this movie.
Oh yeah.
Or about this topic that is going on in this movie. So I can understand why people, you know, would say that about it.
I think that's definitely why they're using Fennel's ties to Killing Eve, because Killing Eve is very much an international like espionage spy show that's also very comedic, and I think that's why a lot of people like it too, because it has very levity moments in there, and I think they're trying to push that as like, hey, this is a serious topic, but Carey Mulligan is being sassy and killing it. So you definitely should like watch this and have a good time. Like it's but also keep in mind this shit's real. Like the kind of something like that.
Yeah, putting on my marketer's hat for my day job, I would hate to be the marketing team for this.
Oh yeah, All right, especially putting it on Christmas. Yeah, that is.
I will say, even though I didn't like for the film as much as you guys, I will say Emerald Fennell. This is bold, original filmmaking, particularly for a first-time feature film writer-director, and I think. Hopefully we're going to see the start of great things from her.
So, same here.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us for our Yap versus Yap, first one in a while. We're going to try and keep doing more of these because, frankly, it's a lot of fun, and hopefully you had fun, too. See you guys.
Yeah.
See you.